In this video, I'll show you how to use BlueSpray's tools to be able to create stream networks and watersheds. This is an area that we just don't have really good tools for, especially with some of the problems that we have with the new DEMs. So I went ahead and spent my summer vacation building this once. First, I'll show you that it's really easy to crop rasters in BlueSpray. That's a marquee tool. You can just draw a box, right-click on the raster, transforms, crop raster, select the AOI or area of interest. That's the marquee. And then notice that that raster is now cropped. I'm not actually going to use that one because I've already cropped this one, but do make sure that you crop your raster down because you don't want to use the whole thing. It would take way too long. You also don't want to crop it too close to the forest because the watersheds flow back into the forest. When we create them, we actually work backwards from a pour point that will be a fair distance from the forest. And I'll show you that. The water tools are all in Transforms Water. Don't use 0 yet. That's one that I'm still working on. Beta means it's in beta testing. Fill 1 pixel sinks. You don't really need to do this one anymore. I had to do quite a bit of work to get flat areas and sinks that are larger than 1 pixels to work. So the new algorithm will actually fill 1 pixel sinks, but we always did it in the past, so why not? It doesn't hurt anything. And then we're going to find our first flow direction. Now every time I run this, make sure you're selecting the correct rasters. There's going to be quite a few by the time we're done. So I'm selecting my filled sink for my elevation raster, and then the output will be my first flow direction raster. And notice we've got little cool arrows pointing directions. Notice they only go in the cardinal directions, up, down, left, right. Should say north, south, east, west, northeast, north, west, southeast, southwest. And as you zoom in, you can see each individual ones. When you're zoomed out, you're not seeing all of them. You're just seeing one of them from that area. And notice that there's some sinks. So there's some areas that water flows into, and some of those are larger than 1 pixel. So this is where the challenge is with these new DEMs, is to resolve these types of areas. So the water that flows in here will never flow out. Even though it looks like it flows out here, this pixel is probably a little bit below that one. So, well, I don't know. Oh yeah, this is a flat area. Sorry, squares mean flat area. So all the water flowing into here is going to flow out here, it looks like. Okay, but we have to figure out how to flow a stream through this flat area. The sinks are circles, and this is actually a pretty good DEM, so it may be a little bit hard to find a sink. Here we go. So you'll see them on the edges more often. Let's go to where the edges are a little lighter. Nope, not there. Okay. But there's going to be some here. There's one. So now this may be an actual real pour point. In other words, the water from here may all flow through that pour point. So we're probably going to end up using that one. But we don't need to spend too much time looking at arrows. You can, if you spend some time, you'll see that the water flows from these high areas, okay, which is the ridge, and then it flows down through our gullies and then flows out. Eventually, this part flows to the bay. So now we just go to the next water tool. We did flow direction. Now we're on to find pour points. Don't have to worry too much about these settings other than make sure you're picking the right elevation raster. And that's going to find a whole bunch of pour points. So it's finding a lot of them. And the reason is because there's little tiny variations in the DEM that may say, oh, look, there's a little tiny watershed here, another little tiny one here. So it's going to find a lot, more than we really need, but that's okay. It'll also find the big ones. Again, we right-click on pour points, go to find initial watershed raster, make sure we have pour points and our flow direction raster, and that will output our first watersheds, which, because of all the issues with the DEM, will not find many watersheds. It finds very little. The red area is all the stuff that has not been moved into a watershed, and we want every pixel in a watershed. So that's where things get trickier. We need to run this number 5, add pixels to a watershed raster. There's our watersheds. Make sure you pick the right direction. Make sure you get the right elevation raster. And now this is going to create a new direction raster. In other words, it's going to take all those flat areas and those sinks, any of them that aren't a pour point, and it's going to force them to flow to one of our pour points. Notice 407,000 pixels were then added to watersheds, and yay, we now have watersheds. Pretty cool. Okay, so we just keep going to the next transform, which is now going to be find accumulation. And we do our new direction raster, not the old one. And boom, we have a beautiful accumulation raster. Now it gets a little strange down here at the bay, right? Because, well, it's a bay, it's flat. It doesn't really have a pour point. And you may see some other areas that have straight lines in them where it's flowing across a lake. There aren't many lakes inside Arcata Forest, but if you do this somewhere else, you may get quite a few. It just doesn't know what to do with water flowing across a lake other than have it flow straight to the pour point at one end of the lake. Now we can find our stream network by using our accumulation, and remember to pick our new direction raster. The minimum accumulation will be where the stream network starts. In other words, here's a headwater, and this is going to go all the way up. In fact, there's going to be little tiny streams in here. If you put that to 1, it'll map almost every single pixel in your raster, and you'll have a very complex stream network. If you make it a larger number, you'll have just larger streams. Okay, so 100 is a good default. And now if we turn off our new direction raster, boom, there's our stream network layer and our watershed layer. Now, one thing to remember about BlueSpray is all of this is held in memory. That's one of the reasons BlueSpray is so fast. So we really have to export this, because if BlueSpray dies or stops working for any reason, I will just lose all my work. So I need to go ahead and save this. And I need to save my watershed raster. Okay. Now that's all I really have to save. But if you're concerned, if you want to do some different work, you can go ahead and save these intermediate layers. For small DEMs, as you can see, it's pretty quick to recreate them. For a large DEM, it's going to take quite a while. So I tend to save them if it's a large DEM. And sometimes I have to do one DEM, do one of these layers, and then save it, and then remove the older layers so that I have enough memory for BlueSpray. Okay, so finally what we want to do is we want to find watersheds in Arcata Forest. And we really haven't identified watersheds of interest here. We've just sort of done things that flow to the outside of our raster. So what I want to do is I want to find the actual rasters. And for that, I needed to find some pour points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. It's going to be a point layer. You don't have to worry about any of the settings. We're going to create it empty. And then we're going to go ahead and right click on the arrow and change it to editable. Select the pencil, and now we can add new points to our point layer. In other words, this is how you digitize inside of BlueSpray. Now this is pretty tricky because you've got to figure out where are the watersheds, and you can look here at the stream and you can say, well, I think that looks like one watershed, and I'm not going to grade you down for having the wrong watersheds, but I will mark off if you don't have watersheds that fully cover Arcata Forest. So I'm going to add a point there. Okay, and then this one I'm not so sure of, but there's one here. It's kind of a big one. So I think I'm going to add a point there. Now you need to get it on one of the corners inside a pixel. Okay, it has to be inside a pixel that has a stream path in it. It's actually going to use your pour point to connect with the accumulation raster and the direction raster and go back upstream from there. I should say the direction raster. Okay, so now we have that one covered. And notice we've got another one over here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a pour point there. Now if we want to zoom around, or pan around I should say, I can switch to the panning tool and then switch back to the pencil and keep going. And it is up to you what you define as a watershed, but I don't want one big watershed. When you do this for real with an agency, they will probably define what the watershed is for you, or they may say we want to do everything above Willow Creek, or we want to do these tributaries, and they'll give you the specific names of the tributaries. I do need to again go around all the way, make sure all of these are covered. For this exercise, I'm just going to add a few more, and I will strategically leave out a couple. Okay, because at this point you might think you have it all covered. And what we can do now is that new direction raster is actually really important, because remember before we had a hard time finding the watersheds. Well, if we do a new watershed now, we pick our pour points, and then we pick our new direction raster, it's going to find, boom, there's our watersheds. Beautiful job. We can put our boundary over that and go, oh, I did actually get them all. I thought there might be some missing over here that I would have to add. But now I have a nice set of watersheds for Arcata Forest. And again, if you're managing them, you might make them smaller. Probably wouldn't make them any larger than that. And now I can export that to a file. Whoops, not that one. That one. Export to file. And make that my, whoops, watersheds for Arcata Forest. And then BlueSpray doesn't have a raster to polygon feature, so save it as a TIFF or an IMG, and then you'll be able to bring it into another GIS package that will allow you to do the raster to polygon conversion. The stream network that you created is already a regular shape, or you can export it as a shapefile, and you're good to go.